The late summer sun hung low over the Cimarron woods, casting a golden glow over every cottonwood leaf like a flickering coin of light. The wind carried the earthy scent of sagebrush, along with the distant cry of a hawk. The evening felt peaceful, if not for the growing tension between settlers and the Apache, splitting the land like a powder keg ready to explode. Dr. Rhea Kane, only 25 but hardened by grief, knelt beside a patch of prairie mint near the creek. Her canvas satchel, filled with herbs for fever remedies, rested by her side. She worked with quiet precision, her face soft with a weariness that only came from losing a husband to a stray bullet and a child to the flames of war. The conflict between the settlers and the Apache was heating up, threatening to burn everyone caught in the middle. And tonight, Rhea found herself deep in that fire. Just as she snipped a sprig of mint, a scream echoed through the woods. A desperate, high-pitched scream. Not the cry of a grown man, but of someone helpless. Rhea froze. Another scream followed louder, panicked rippling across the creek like the cry of a wounded animal. "Oh dear God," she muttered, shoving herbs into her bag as she stood. Normally she would have turned and run the other way. But the folks in Cimarron were quick to draw their guns, and something about that voice, the raw panic, drove her forward. She pushed through the willows, following the sound until she spotted movement next to a fallen log. There, tangled in the brush, was a boy no older than 10, clutching his leg. His worn moccasins, vest, and braids told her everything she needed to know. Apache. Her heart skipped a beat. He looked up at her, eyes wide with fear and pain. Blood had soaked through the leather straps around his leg. The boy tried to stand, yelping loudly enough to scatter every bird in the area. Rhea rushed forward on instinct. "Easy now, don't move," she said softly. The boy blinked at her, startled. You're white. So are half my patients," she shot back, kneeling beside him. "Sit still. I didn't do nothing," the boy protested weakly. "Did the rabbit shoot you?" she asked dryly. The boy sniffled, shrugging. "Maybe." Rhea sighed, pulling off her gloves. The wound was from a steel trap, deep and jagged, a perfect breeding ground for infection. "All right, kid," she said, pulling a canteen from her bag. "This is gonna hurt, but we gotta clean it up." Before she could finish, the boy let out a scream so loud it made the tree branches tremble. Rhea nearly dropped her canteen. The boy screamed even louder. She grabbed his cheeks, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me, sweetheart. If you scream again, the whole town will hear and we'll both be dead. Got it?" The boy slapped both hands over his mouth, wide-eyed. His eyes bulged above his fingers. What he asked, lowering one hand. "I ain't even married yet," she said, blinking in surprise before laughing a real laugh, the first in months. "Yeah, you look it," the boy said, puffing out his chest despite the pain. "But I gotta live long enough to find a wife." Rhea smirked. "You're a piece of work. Let's save your leg first, then we'll talk weddings." With brisk, practiced hands, she cleaned the wound, sprinkled powdered comfrey, and wrapped it tightly with clean cloth, reinforcing it with a splint made from 2 sticks. The boy winced, bit at his lip, and groaned. But he didn't scream again. By the end, sweat dripped from his forehead. Rhea sat back on her heels. "There, you're patched up." The boy tested his leg cautiously, then to Rhea's surprise he stood. "I'm okay. I can walk." His face lit up with boyish pride. "Don't push it," she warned. He nodded solemnly, then raised his fist to the sky. "I swear I'll repay this. One day I'll climb mountains, swim oceans, hunt bison." "Whatever it takes, huh?" she said, amused. "Maybe start with listening to your doctor." The wind shifted, carrying the boy's earlier screams across the valley. Rhea's blood ran cold. Someone might have heard them. No, someone definitely heard. Footsteps crackled behind her. A branch snapped. She whipped around but saw no one. When she turned back, the boy had already scrambled away through the brush, limping but determined. He threw a grateful grin over his shoulder. "Thank you, Doc." And then he was gone. Rhea's stomach twisted. Helping an Apache child, no matter how innocent, was enough to get her condemned by her own people. Her heart had always been too soft for a land this ruthless. She gathered her bag, wiped her hands on her skirt, and started back through the trees, telling herself everything would calm down. But she knew Cimarron, and Cimarron never let things go. By the time Rhea stepped out of the woods, she felt it. The shift in the air, the weight of the tension, the sensation of unseen eyes tracking her every move. Someone had seen her, and the trouble she'd fought so hard to avoid was closing in. The sky over Cimarron had turned a bruised purple warning of a storm or something worse. Rhea pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and kept her pace steady, pretending she didn't feel the oppressive weight of invisible eyes on her from the trees. There was only one person in town who liked to slink around the woods at dusk. Mac Stroud. Big man, small heart, smaller mind. And unfortunately for her, he had the eyesight of an eagle and the gossiping mouth of an old woman. Sure enough, when she reached the edge of town, she saw him standing outside the feed store, panting like he'd run the whole mile, probably because he had. His face was flushed red, and his hands flailed as he spoke to Sheriff Jeb Pierce and a growing crowd. Oh no. Oh hell no. Max spotted her and jabbed a finger at her chest. That's her right there, the dock lady. I seen it with my own 2 eyes. Rhea's throat tightened with rising dread, but she forced herself to keep walking chin high. Sheriff Jeb Pierce narrowed his eyes. Seen what Stroud Mac puffed out his chest with self-importance. She was kneeling in the dirt helping one of them, Apache boys. Talking to him, touching him, patching him up like he was one of us. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some gasped, some cursed, others stared at her like she was a rattlesnake coiled up under their boot. Lena Black, a woman Rhea had once helped deliver a baby, clutched her shawl as though she had been betrayed. She helped an Apache, an old man muttered. After what they did to this town. I knew she was too soft, another man spat. Soft gets folks killed. Someone chimed in. I heard Apache scouts were spotted near our ranches just this morning. Maybe they were looking for that boy she saved. Rhea shot back, pulse racing. That ain't true. The boy was hurt. He needed help. That's all. Mac raised his hands dramatically. Oh, listen to that. Defending the savages now. The crowd erupted in ugly laughter. Mocking laughter. Sheriff Pierce stepped forward, his jaw tight. All right, folks, calm down. Let's just... But a woman, Rhea had once considered a friend, stepped forward, cutting him off. I trusted you with my children's lives, Doctor, and now you choose Apache over your own town. Rhea felt those words twist inside her like a knife. I chose to save a child, she replied softly. A burly ranch hand pushed forward, his voice full of venom. That makes you a traitor. More voices joined in, calling her a traitor, accusing her of bringing danger on them all. She wants the Apache to storm the town. Should have never trusted an outsider. Rhea's breath caught. Outsider. After years of treating their fevers, patching their wounds, delivering their babies mourning with their families, and they still saw her as someone who didn't belong. Mac lifted his chin as if he were delivering a sentence. We ought to tie her up and let the good Lord decide her fate. A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Let God judge her. Yeah, let the sunrise tell us what's right. That's how we deal with folks who play both sides. Rhea stepped back, her chest tightening as horror stole her breath. You can't be serious, she whispered. You all know me, you know my work, you know my family. But the mob didn't care about memories or reason. Fear had sunk too deep into their bones. Sheriff Pierce raised a hand, his voice uncertain. Maybe we ought to give her the night to think things over. Max saw his moment and grabbed it. Up on Widow's Bluff. Leave her there, under the cold sky. If she makes it, she's innocent. And if she freezes, someone called out, that's God's judgment. Rhea's stomach dropped. This wasn't about justice. It was about finding someone to blame. Hands grabbed her rough and unkind, dragging her backward as the crowd surged around her like wild animals. "Wait, stop," she cried, struggling. "Listen to me, that boy was hurt. You'd have done the same." But the ranch hand holding her snarled, "I wouldn't spit on an Apache if he was on fire." Her blood froze in her veins. Lena Black turned her face away. "I'm sorry, Rhea, but you've crossed a line." The world blurred as they dragged her through town up the winding trail to Widow's Bluff, a jagged overlook nearly 70 feet above the ravine below. The wind howled even on gentle days. Tonight it sliced through her clothes and skin like 1,000 knives. They reached the lone cedar at the cliff's edge and shoved her against the rough trunk. Rhea gasped as her back hit the bark, the pain shooting through her. "Mac, please," she begged one last time, her voice cracking. "You know this isn't right." But Mac Stroud only smirked, enjoying his moment far too much. "Tie her," he ordered. The rope cut into her wrists tighter and tighter until her hands went numb. 2 men secured her ankles, and Rhea winced, but kept her eyes forward, refusing to show weakness in front of them. When they stepped back, Sheriff Jeb Pierce sighed deeply. "We'll check on you at sunrise," he muttered. "If God wants her to live," Mac added smugly, "he'll send someone." The crowd dispersed, their boots thudding down the trail, their voices fading into the night. Rhea was left alone with the shrieking wind and the smell of cold dirt. Night swallowed the last light. For the first time since her husband and child died, Rhea began to tremble, not from grief, but from the raw, paralyzing fear of dying alone. The cold crept deeper with each passing hour. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Her vision blurred around the edges, and a terrible thought took hold of her. Maybe this is how it ends. She tried to whisper a prayer, but her lips were too numb to form the words. The wind howled through the cedar branches like a warning from a distant god. A single tear slid down her cheek, freezing as it touched her skin. And somewhere in the dark woods below, a pair of sharp eyes opened. Apache eyes. Watching. Waiting. Moving. Her fate wasn't sealed yet. The night grew even colder. A coppery moon hung low over the Cimarron Valley, staining the clouds the color of an old wound. The wind cut up the cliff face in sharp bursts, stealing the breath from Rhea's lungs. Her fingers were numb and her legs shook so violently that the rope burned her skin raw. Her heartbeat slowed heavy and thick, like it was carrying stones instead of blood. "I don't want to die here," she thought. "Not like this. Not alone." But the dark was vast and empty. No voice answered her. No hope flickered. Until it did. A shadow detached itself from the tree line far below. Silent. Smooth. Too smooth to be a cougar. Too controlled to be a man stumbling in the dark. It moved upward with purpose. Rhea blinked through the haze of cold. At first she thought it might be someone from her past. "Matthew, is that you?" But when the figure stepped into the moonlight, she recognized him instantly. It was Talon Cross. His thick braids, wind-scarred cheeks, and broad shoulders beneath worn buckskin gave him the air of a warrior used to hardship. A man who survived on grit and stubbornness. And he looked furious. Not wild furious. Not reckless furious. A cold, controlled anger that could freeze fire itself. His footsteps made no sound on the frozen ground as he approached her like a mountain rising. Rhea felt her knees buckle, but it wasn't from the cold, it was from relief. Her voice cracked in the wind. "Please save me." Talon didn't speak at first. He ran his hand over the rope, biting into her wrists, his fingers brushing the torn skin. Rhea winced. His jaw flexed. "They left you here to die," he said at last, his voice low and dangerous. She nodded weakly, but her head drooped. "I helped your brother." "And they—" "I know," he said, his voice steady. "Jack told me the moment he limped home with half a splint and twice the attitude." Despite her suffering, Rhea managed a shaky laugh. "Sounds like him," she said softly. Talon's expression barely softened, but there was something gentler in his eyes. He drew a hunting knife from his belt. The blade gleamed in the red moonlight. He sliced clean through the first rope. Rhea gasped as her arms fell forward. She didn't have the strength to catch herself, but Talon caught her instead. One strong arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her upright, anchoring her to something warm for the first time in hours. "Easy," he murmured. Her voice trembled. "Thank you. Please don't leave me." "I wouldn't," he said simply. His tone sharpened. "You saved my little brother. Apache don't forget things like that." He knelt to cut the rope that bound her ankles. As soon as it snapped, her legs gave out entirely and she slumped forward into his chest. Talon stiffened, then adjusted his stance so she wouldn't fall. "You're freezing," he muttered. "I've noticed," she mumbled weakly. "I'm taking you home." "Home," she whispered. "Yes." He sheathed the knife and effortlessly lifted her into his arms. For a man who lived in poverty, he carried her like she was as light as a feather. Down the narrow cliff trail, his old bay horse stood waiting. The horse's ribs were visible, its saddle patched so many times it was more thread than leather. Talon stroked the horse's neck. "Come on, old friend," he said softly. "I need one more favor." The horse exhaled as if tired of favors, but accepted its fate. Talon mounted with practiced ease, pulling Rhea into his lap and wrapping one arm around her to keep her upright. "Lean on me," he instructed. She rested her cheek against his shoulder, shivering. "I don't have much choice," she muttered. He nudged the horse forward, guiding them through the dark, cold forest. For a long while, the only sounds were the rhythm of the horse's hooves and the wind whispering through the pines. Rhea's mind drifted in and out like a dying candle's flicker. After a while, she whispered, "Why would you risk so much for me?" Talon didn't hesitate. "You saved Kai." "He was just a child," she whispered. "And you are just a woman," he replied. "But that didn't stop them from leaving you to die." The words stung because they were true. Talon's voice softened. "Kindness is rare in this land. When someone gives it, we honor it." Rhea felt tears sting her eyes from exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "For listening," he said softly, when no one else did. "You're safe now." Somewhere between the cliffs and the valley floor, her shivering subsided. Her breathing steadied. She clung to consciousness only because the warmth of Talon's chest anchored her to the world. Finally, the horse slowed. "We're home," Talon murmured. Rhea forced her eyes open. A small Apache settlement appeared through the trees, nestled between pines and jagged rock outcrops. Smoke curled from low chimneys and small wooden huts leaned slightly from age and time. And there, near a crooked fence, stood a humble little cabin. Its door hung uneven and old furs were nailed over the cracks. A tiny chimney puffed weak smoke, trying its best. It was poor, weather-beaten, a mess, but somehow warm. Talon carried her inside, kicking the door closed behind him. The room glowed with firelight from a stone hearth. The floors were worn smooth from years of use. Piles of furs made crude bedding. The entire place smelled of smoked leather and pine. It was the home of a man with little, but still offering what little he had. As he gently lowered her onto the bed, the door banged open. Kai stumbled inside, arms full of firewood he'd gathered. "Talon." "I heard a horse." He froze, his eyes going wide. "Rhea." She tried to smile, but it was all she could manage before exhaustion claimed her. Darkness enveloped her, but this time she wasn't alone or afraid. When Rhea woke the next morning, the first thing she felt was warmth. Real warmth. A fire crackled nearby, filling the cabin with the earthy scent of pine sap and burning bark. The second thing she noticed was the weight of a thick buffalo hide blanket over her legs. The third thing was Talon's face only inches from hers. She yelped and Talon jerked awake, looking as though someone had shot a gun beside his ear. Kai, lying on the other side, flailed an arm and shouted, "I didn't steal the cookies." For a moment, all three of them stared at each other, blinking in confusion, still caught in the fog of sleep. Talon cleared his throat first. You were shaking from the cold. The fire went out once he added. We shared the bed for warmth. Kai sat up indignantly. Yeah, you pulled the blanket to your side, so we had to. Rhea raised both hands. Wait. Stop right there. You mean you two slept freezing while I hogged the blanket? Kai nodded solemnly. You're real strong for a doctor, Talon muttered, rubbing his tired arms. We nearly froze to death. Rhea's face burned with embarrassment. Well, you two snore loud enough to level the whole cabin. Kai gasped. We do not. Yeah, you do, Talon said calmly, rubbing his eyes. Rhea chuckled, then winced. I'm living with liars. Talon looked at her with something soft in his eyes. You're safe now. Rhea glared at him. Dark circles beneath her eyes from a restless night. Last night I thought the U.S. Army was testing cannons right outside this window. Talon shrugged. You get used to it. I won't, she said flatly. But despite the soreness in her body, the embarrassment of her tangled hair, and her lips still numb from the cold, something unfamiliar warmed Rhea's chest. Safety. She wasn't tied to a tree. She wasn't alone. She wasn't dead. She was in a worn-down Apache cabin with two of the strangest brothers she'd ever met. And somehow that made her breathe a little easier. The cabin itself was barely bigger than a horse stall, a patchwork of logs, held together by grit and mud. Fur pelts hung over the walls to block the wind from slipping through the cracks. A single cracked window let in a thin beam of morning light. Talon crossed the room in the 3 quick steps, adding wood to the hearth. Kai tossed his coat over a 3-legged stool, humming as he did so. Rhea rubbed her wrists where the rope had burned her skin. Where exactly are we? Talon glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. High camp. My village. Why bring me here? She asked softly. Talon didn't show much emotion, but there was something in his eyes that softened slightly. You saved Kai. Now we save you. Simple. Kai piped up proudly. We don't break our word, even if we're broke. Talon shot him a warning glance. What? Kai raised his brows. It's not a secret. He gestured around the cabin. This place is tiny. If we ever get rich, I'll buy us a bigger cabin. Kai continued. One with a door that doesn't whistle when the wind hits it. Rhea snorted. Talon sighed. Ignore him. But Kai just grinned wider. When Rhea finally tried to stand, her legs trembled like a newborn colt. Talon instinctively reached out, steadying her elbow. Her cheeks warmed again. I'm fine, she insisted. You're not, he countered. You lost too much heat. Rest today. I can't rest for a whole day. Kai raised both eyebrows. Why? Got another Apache to rescue. Rhea glared at him, but Kai only smirked. Outside morning broke over the ridge, spilling golden light through the pines. Villagers passed by the cabin, whispers trailing behind them. That's the white doctor, one muttered. She's the one they left tied up at Widow's Bluff. Poor thing. Talon brought her home. Well, that means something. Maybe he'll finally settle down, another whispered. Shut up. Rhea muttered under her breath, but she saw Talon's jaw tighten, pretending he hadn't heard. Rhea frowned. They don't seem angry. We don't punish for helping a child, Talon said simply. The world does enough punishing already. Her throat tightened as memories flooded back, the shouts, the rough hands, the fear. The betrayal stung all over again. Kai plopped down beside her, grinning. Hey, I got something for you. He rummaged around in a basket and pulled out a small carved wooden rabbit. Rhea blinked. Is that supposed to be a rabbit? Kai squinted at it. Well, yeah. It's got ears. Where she asked, examining it closely. These little bumps, he said proudly. Talon walked past, muttering. Looks like a deformed potato. Kai gasped, offended. It's a rabbit potato. Rhea burst out laughing, unexpected and uncontrollable. The brothers exchanged a glance, as if silently agreeing. Well, we must be doing something right. Talon busied himself adjusting the furs on the bed, though Rhea noticed the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Later, when Rhea finally stepped outside, the sun warming her skin, she felt the entire village watching her, not with hatred, but with curiosity. Some smiled politely, some waved, some whispered, but no one raised a hand against her. No one tied her to a tree. No one called her a traitor. Talon stood beside her, arms folded, scanning the distance like a sentinel. Kai stood at her other side, proudly announcing to anyone who passed, "This is Rhea. She saved my life, and she snores louder than a buffalo." Rhea sputtered, "I do not." "You do," Talon said calmly. "I absolutely do not." Both brothers nodded in unison. She threw her hands up in exasperation. "Oh, wonderful. I'm living with liars," she muttered. Talon looked down at her, his eyes warm with something Rhea couldn't name yet. "Welcome home," he said quietly. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. Home. It wasn't a word she ever expected to hear again. Not here. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. But standing between a smart-mouthed 10-year-old and a stubborn Apache chief who risked everything to save her. Maybe, just maybe, it didn't sound so impossible. The morning in the Apache village smelled of pine smoke, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of corn cakes cooking nearby. Rhea. Though everyone had already started calling her by a new name, Hana stood outside Talon Cross's crooked little cabin, watching the sun creep over the ridge like a shy child. Hana meant flour that heals after fire, and they'd given it to her at dawn 2 days ago after seeing how she treated not only Kai, but 2 elders with aching joints and a newborn burning with fever. She had protested, said she didn't deserve a new name, but the village had ignored her. And now they called her Hana, and deep down, she couldn't deny the warmth it gave her. Talon emerged from the cabin, pulling on his boots, his dark hair braided neatly, despite the wear and tear on him from the wind. He gave her a nod. "You should eat," he said. "You should sleep," she countered. Talon paused. "I did sleep," when she teased. Between which snores? Between the buffalo stampede or the cannon fire, Kai stumbled out behind him, carrying an armful of wet firewood. "She's exaggerating, Talon. We only snored like half a buffalo." Talon shrugged. "I'll take her word. You would?" Kai muttered, rolling his eyes dramatically. Hana stifled a laugh. In the days that followed, the village discovered something remarkable about her. She wasn't just a doctor, she was a doctor who knew things they didn't. She knew plants that the Apache didn't often use, and they had plants she'd never even heard of. The women took Hana by the hand, literally dragging her at times, to show her things like cactus poultices, choke cherry bark, and how to make soap from yucca fibers. In return, Hana demonstrated how to clean wounds with boiled water, how to prevent infections, and how to brew willow tea to ease fevers without knocking the drinker out. It was a trade of knowledge, and it spread like wildfire. Villagers came from as far as 2 miles away with sprained ankles, toothaches, or children who had eaten things they definitely shouldn't have. Kai proudly served as her assistant, which mostly involved getting underfoot and telling everyone he was her official apprentice. "An apprentice should listen," he'd say. Hana scolded him one afternoon. "Kai, listen." To what, he asked. "To everything except the boring stuff." Hana groaned and Talon smirked. Life felt strangely full. Word of Hana's skill traveled faster than wildfire. 3 weeks after her arrival, she was helping an elderly woman sift crushed herbs when shouts erupted from the southern ridge. Kai peeked out the window. Hana Talon. Talon stepped outside, his entire posture sharpening like a blade. Rhea's blood ran cold as she saw riders approaching from the plains. White men, armed, 5 of them. The tallest, broad-shouldered and sunburned, wore a sheriff's badge that had seen better days. He jabbed a finger toward the nearest Apache warrior. "We're here for the woman you're hiding," he barked. The villagers began to gather, murmurs rising like restless bees. "She belongs to us," one of the white men spat. "You savages kidnapped her from Cimarron." Kidnapped. The word stung like a wasp. Hana stepped forward despite Talon's subtle arm trying to stop her. "No one kidnapped me." The sheriff glared. "Town says different." "They tied her to die," Talon said flatly. The murmurs swelled. "She is one of us now." Talon added, his voice steady and deep. "We do not return those we protect." That only enraged the sheriff more. "You've got two choices. One, let her go. Two, war." Kai scoffed loudly. "You can't even fight a goat without losing." Kai Hana warned under her breath, but the boy only smirked. The sheriff dismounted in a single angry hop, marching up to Hana until his breath hit her face, thick with whiskey and rage. "You're coming home with me." "I have no home with people who left me to die," Hana replied firmly. "She's speaking Apache now," someone muttered behind her. "She is Apache," another corrected proudly. Talon stepped closer to her, his shoulders squared. "She stays," he said. The sheriff's face twisted with fury. In a blur of motion, he lunged, grabbing Hana by the arm and yanking her forward. A knife flashed at her throat. A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Anyone moves," the sheriff snarled, pressing the knife harder against Hana's throat, "and I'll send her soul straight to heaven." Talon's eyes darkened like storm clouds rolling down from the mountains. "Let her go," he said, his voice low and deadly calm. Hana's pulse hammered in her ears as the blade pressed deeper. Then her voice broke through the tension, raw with emotion. "I was born in Cimarron, but my soul belongs to the Apache. I am Apache." A heavy silence fell over the village. Then a single arrow flew from above, cutting through the air with a deadly hiss. It buried itself deep into the sheriff's shoulder. He howled, dropping the knife and collapsing to his knees. The crowd turned toward the rooftops. There, standing triumphantly on the roof of Talon's cabin, was Kai, feet planted, wide bow raised, a cocky grin on his face. "Don't ever come here again," he shouted, "and stay away from my sister Hana." "Kai," Hana cried, part horrified, part touched. The sheriff staggered back, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "We're leaving," one of his men shouted, hauling him onto a horse. The riders tore across the plains, disappearing into a cloud of dust and humiliation. As the noise faded, the village erupted in cheers. Children danced around Hana. Women embraced her. The warriors clapped Talon on the back. Talon turned to Kai, arms crossed. "You shot him!" Kai nodded proudly. "Dead center." "Well, shoulder center," he corrected. Hana cupped the boy's cheeks. "You could have gotten hurt." Kai blinked innocently. "But I didn't." Talon shook his head, though he couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. "That kid's gonna be impossible tomorrow." That night the Apaches celebrated not a battle won, but a woman reclaimed. A healer who had brought both trouble and miracles into their lives. A woman who had finally found where she belonged. The village glowed under the stars, nestled in the pines, the firelight dancing in the cool mountain air. Torches lined the central clearing, and the drums pulsed like a steady heartbeat, while laughter rose into the crisp night. Even the stars seemed to lean closer, curious about the celebration unfolding below. It wasn't often the Apache held a feast, not with winter creeping near and food running low. But tonight wasn't about wealth or plenty. Tonight was about Hana, the white doctor who returned home not by blood, but by choice. And about the boy who saved her with the boldest arrow in Cimarron history. Kai strutted around the fire like he was 10 feet tall and made of pure heroism. Children followed him in a pack, begging to hear the story again. "Did you really shoot him from the roof? Did you aim for his heart? Were you scared?" Kai puffed his chest. "Scared me? No. I only trembled 'cause it was windy. Hana snorted into her cup of warm juniper tea. Across the clearing, Talon watched her. It wasn't obvious. Most people would have missed it. But Hana had become skilled at reading the smallest shifts in his expression, the way the firelight softened the stern set of his jaw, the way his eyes followed her like she was the only steady thing in a world that refused steadiness. Kai, however, noticed everything. He skidded to Hana's side, tugging her sleeve urgently. "Come with me." "Why?" she asked. Kai rolled his eyes dramatically. "Because if I tell you, it won't work." Before she could argue, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her across the clearing, straight toward Talon. Talon raised an eyebrow. "Kai," Talon muttered, but the boy wasn't listening. He leaned in close, whispering too loudly. "You're welcome." Hana frowned. For what Kai sighed like a parent exhausted by foolish children. "Look, Hana, there's something on your face." She blinked. "What? Where?" "Right here," Kai said, smacking a finger onto her cheek. Talon instinctively leaned in to inspect. As soon as their eyes met, Kai grinned, stepped back, and shouted, "There now, talk!" Then he ran off, laughing like a maniac. Hana's cheeks burned. That little traitor. Talon didn't laugh. He simply looked at her longer than he ever had before. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly. Hana froze. "Oh, I thought maybe there was a fly on my face and you were about to slap it." That earned a soft, unexpected laugh from him. "No," he said, "that joke's old, and no one bathes twice in the same river." She scrunched her nose. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Talon said, taking a step closer, "that you're not the same woman I first carried through that door." Her heartbeat stuttered. Talon hesitated, searching for words that didn't come easily for him. "And I'm not the same man." Hana looked up at him, the crackling fire behind them, casting a warm, golden glow. "Talon," she whispered, "you saved my life." "You saved my brother," he replied, his voice steady. "You brought me home," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave this home a heartbeat," he responded quietly. The drums in the distance faded into a soft rhythm, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Talon reached out gently, brushing his thumb over the spot where Kai had poked her cheek earlier. Hana didn't move, not because she couldn't, but because her legs had somehow forgotten how to stand. "You can still say no," he murmured, his voice low, like he was waiting for her answer. She shook her head, her breath shaky. "I'm done saying no to the things that saved me." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, rare and genuine, almost shy, like it had taken him years to let it out. With the patience of a man who had learned to move carefully through a world full of danger. Talon leaned forward, kissing her gently. It wasn't rushed, nor was it reckless. It wasn't desperate. It was steady, familiar. The kind of kiss that anchored two storms into one calm horizon. The drums swelled, and the villagers cheered. Somewhere Kai shouted, "Finally, took you long enough." Hana laughed softly against Talon's lips. Talon growled back, "Kai, no." From atop a barrel, Kai shouted, "I'm the hero of this love story. Without me, you two would still be staring at each other like confused cows." Hana pulled away just long enough to shout back, "Thank you, Kai." Kai pumped his fist in the air triumphantly. "You're welcome," Talon muttered under his breath. "That kid's going to be impossible tomorrow." Hana smiled, resting her forehead against Talon's. "We'll handle him together." "Together," he echoed softly, his voice full of warmth. "I like the sound of that." The fire crackled higher, sending sparks drifting into the night sky like tiny orange prayers. The villagers danced. Kai bragged, and the mountains seemed to hold their breath. And under the watchful stars and the blessing of the flames, Hana and Talon began a life neither of them had known. They were searching for a life built from healing courage, and a love that rose from the ashes like a stubborn, beautiful wildfire. And so beneath the wide-open western sky, Hana and Talon built a future, born from mercy, courage, and a love strong enough to quiet the war between worlds. Their story lived on in every whispered legend carried by the Cimarron wind. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit subscribe, share, and leave a comment so I can bring you even more adventures. Thank you all for listening.